Gary, the policies that we have followed over the last 10 years, quite frankly, have sent us into the arms and dependency of China. We have fallen for wanting to have cheap consumer goods, which are the product of slave labour in China. In return, what we have done is we are on the way to becoming the vassal state that China wants us to be. They want our minerals and they want our food, and they want us not to take a knee or to be on both knees, but to be prostrating ourselves to the Chinese warlord. There is nothing about defence that China is doing in the South China Sea. It's aggression. And be under no illusions. Under President Xi, we believed for a long time that under Deng Xiaoping, when policy seemed to be quite different, that with some prosperity and lifting people out of some degree of poverty, that they would see a loosening of the ties and a building of political freedom. That has just come absolutely to an end if it was ever going to be the way. President Xi is going back to the mould of Chairman Mao. And what he wants is dominance. He wants to see the dollar, the US dollar, broken as the international currency. He wants to see it replaced with Chinese currency. And he wants to be the single power, in the greatest power in the world. Be under no illusions. And that means we are under the heel of the boot. Now, if we are to have any chance of standing up for ourselves, we have to put Australians first and we have to get out of Paris. That alone will say, China, we are no longer going to give you the advantage that you get from our being in Paris. You take our coal and our steel and you make those frightful damn turbines that you send out here, and then cause us to subsidise to be used and then to left to be death structures, and talk about statues left in the earth, useless ones that won't come down. We have just got to see that playing these games are no longer viable in a time when we are seeing real aggression on our threshold. And the reason we're seeing that aggression is simply because all socialist economies fail. You know, I've said before, I may not be the world expert, but I have studied socialism and I know it. And so as their economy gets worse and worse, so their aggression will become greater and greater. So we really have to pull up our socks and say, no more of this stuff. You're quite right, Gideon, in saying, as I have said again and again, we've got to get out of that French submarine deal. We need submarines that will serve us now. We need platforms that will serve us now. It's no good saying that you're quite right to say it was a pseudo-industrial relations policy. It's got to be a proper defence policy, which is what I put in place when I was Defence Industry Minister, and said that, in fact, foreign firms could only do business here if there were 6 rules that they had to follow that I put in place, which would see benefit to Australia. So Australia first has to be our policy.
Well, I don't see that this should be a problem. I mean, Gideon, there's a shopping list. You've got the Pacific Island nations that are going broke before our very eyes because we can't fly there. The coronavirus problem in Victoria has added to the delays of getting them back on the hook. But they'll be into Beijing real fast. I warned a couple of weeks ago about that. It's not getting any better. You've got the problems in Hong Kong, which are creating a diversion of attention right around the world about what's going on, and it's awful what's occurring there. Basic human rights being denied, a country that had been used to a democratic tradition now being offered safe havens in places like Britain and here. And then you've got Taiwan, which I think is just a sniff away from the Chinese aggression as well. This is a scary prospect, Gideon. These things are real. They need to be talked about. And it's not an anti-China rhetoric, it's an anti-Communist Party, Chinese Communist Party rhetoric that I'm offering here. I might be right-wing, mate, but I reckon 75% of Australians are more right-wing than me on these basic issues.
Look, the last point you've raised is so correct, Gary, and so important. You know, China is... and frankly its apologists here in the West are saying that any all criticism of it is racist. No, I personally am a lifelong lover of Chinese people, of Chinese civilization, of Chinese culture, of Chinese history, but what I hate is the Chinese Communist Party, and that is because of the very reason that I love China and I love Hong Kong. And I was suspicious of China for a very long time, but when I saw a place as wonderful as Hong Kong, one of the most, well, in fact, on many measures, the most free place on planet Earth, a glittering, glorious metropolis that shows that the values that we hold dear, like liberty, democracy, personal freedom, the rule of law, are not culturally contingent. Indeed, values that people in Hong Kong are willing to march and indeed die for. That, to me, brought home how much of a threat this is. You've rattled off the laundry list of Chinese territorial ambitions, but you are forgetting, frankly, the stash around the Indian border recently, for example, the fact that Uyghur Muslims are being put into concentration camps, adventurism in the South China Sea, which has been discussed tonight. This we have to take very, very seriously. And one thing that I was very pleased about was Scott Morrison and the coalition government opening up the door for Hong Kong citizens to have a fast track to Australia. That is the precise reason why Australia has a refugee program. And Gary, make no mistake, these people are refugees. Millions of Hong Kongers marched in the streets to support democracy, and through facial recognition software, the CCP knows exactly who they are. We need to urgently bring the residents of Hong Kong who are fleeing persecution to Australia, not just because it's the right thing to do, not just because it's humane, not just because what's happening in Hong Kong is a disgrace, but because the people of Hong Kong would make a tremendous contribution to this country. These are people who love freedom, frankly, more than a lot of people who live here, are people who are energetic, entrepreneurial. The only problem with bringing Hong Kong residents here is that when they have a look at our tax system, they'll probably want to go back to Hong Kong.
Yeah, go from 15% to 50%. Caroline, we've got to take a break because it's a hard break at the top of the hour, but I just want to make one last point before we go to the break, and I'll come back and I'll start with you, Caroline. And that is the great Matt Canavan. Boy, do we need more people like him in the Australian Parliament. He made the point that you can't defend Australia with renewables and solar this week, which is what we're saying here tonight. And, of course, the other point to note is what's Japan doing? It's installing coal-fired power stations. And what coal are they using? Australia's. It's really quite simple. Aren't we just stupid? Ring your local federal member and tell them what you think.